Now, when it gets later in the season, I'm talking end of November when there's no rut left and into December, our focus really shifts. And it's almost shifting back to October times, but different locations. It's really hard. Think about a mature buck, if he's still alive. And does and fawns, the herd follows this too. It's kind of like that time of year, this time of year, when you see several does in a sit, you got a chance of seeing a buck because they seem to follow. And it doesn't matter if it's a doe family group or a mature buck. There's not a lot of cover, and there's certainly not a lot of food that's left unpressured in the woods. And the problem is, even if you have unpressured food, if you don't have unpressured cover, then why are the deer going to be there in that food source unless they can come from a different angle? They can come from a different side. So if your land has the pressured cover and you have food on the outside, so maybe some deer will come from the neighbors then if they have unpressured cover. But when it comes to pressured food, and that's why food is in all caps here, it's the priority. If you don't have unpressured food, why are the deer even going to be in your unpressured cover? Unless they're going to a neighbor's food source. So bottom line is, you have to have that unpressured food source to drive the deer movement. That's why deer start to become herded up. Not only will they go to winter cover, they're looking for winter food, fall food, cold weather food. And let's face it, there's a lot less food. Around here, all the acres of corn around us, they're right and then plowed under right now. They're manured, chisel plowed, and it's crazy. I don't know how the farmers do it as far as the waste of corn, but there's at least a kernel every couple inches, few inches with broken, busted cobs in the ag fields around here where there was corn spread out everywhere. So deer can feed everywhere in those fields, and then all of a sudden it gets all plowed under. So those unpressured corners of ag fields that deer move to all of a sudden become non-existent, and so do those bedding areas that relate to that. No different than if you pressured out a food source on your own property. They'll get pressured, and then those relating bedding areas will get spooked out. So I love focusing and finding unpressured food sources. Now we talk about food plots a lot for private land, but what about private land clear cuts, public land clear cuts, maybe a red oak flat? Beech nuts I've even seen draw deer really good in late season. We go out the very end of November, early December for Pennsylvania's gun season opener out on public land. And I've seen beech nuts do really well for deer and deer foraging, cherries, and certainly acorns. And when you have thousands of acres of hardwoods and there's a lot of acorns, there's acorns everywhere. So you're looking for those hidden areas away from common parking areas, foot traffic areas. And what I find in Pennsylvania are certainly those flats that relate to hemlock bottoms where deer during bad weather can go to and seek shelter and then just go out and have this good food source right next to them. So I'm looking for clear cuts on public land where we used to hunt in southeast Ohio a lot. They were giant magnets of deer movement for bedding and food, especially the later in the season it became. Down there, you had a lot of greenbrier. And so you look at that greenbrier, and it was interesting. You might look at that in the off season and you go into one area and the greenbrier is higher than your head in a giant tangle. And then you go into another area and it's clipped all down to a foot high. Well, that tells you where the deer are feeding and where they're relating to, especially when it gets colder. They love to hit that greenbrier, especially in November, December, and then all winter long. It's a average food source that's available everywhere. And that's partly the reason you get some monsters down there too, because they have plenty of food, 365 and no winter kill. So I'm looking for those clear cuts, hidden apple orchards from a old homestead, really diverse cover where hardwoods meet swamp edge, where you have young timber, old timber, certainly those clear cuts. The more diversity, the better. If you look at a top on an aerial photo, like when we're looking at HuntWise and we look down and you can see all the different colors on the tops and the different size tops, more like black smears for tag alder or low bush like cedar, then in all that comes and it's in one picture that's a mile by mile, then you know there's a lot of diversity there. There's an opportunity for deer to be there too. So we're really focusing on that unpressured food source, whether it's on public or private land. Public land's a little bit different because it could be the food source of the moment. They might be hitting that area for 2 or 3 weeks and then they're going to another food source that's peaking somewhere else. It could be at the backyard of someone's house that starts to feed the deer in the wintertime or has been feeding them during hunting season. This is all the food that's left in that area. Someone's food plot on the outside too. So you're hunting public land, going in a backdoor way, getting a half mile away from those exterior food sources are, sitting back waiting for them to come back to you. And by then, they'll probably be pushed back a half mile on public land too. Morning hunt. We're talking about this being a late season PM sit. Unless there's rutting behavior, I'm not hunting in the morning, because a lot of times the deer are already in their bedding areas and you're spooking them out. Now, there is an exception. You get really frigid cold weather. You have a hardwood flat or an area like Greenbrier Top where the deer might be feeding, and it's adjacent to a well-known good bedding area to you, public land, private land, then those deer will a lot of times come out of that bedding area mid-morning when the sun heats up, and they're not moving when it was 10 degrees in the morning. They're moving when it's 27 a couple hours later, and it's going to get a high of 40. Then they're burning less energy to actually move around and feed. And that's a way they conserve energy. It's something they do to where the coldest portion of the day, when it's 0 or 10 right at daybreak, they're probably bedded. So if you're going into a bedding area, side of a bedding area like you would during the rut, they're already there, you're probably spooking them. But this, just move your stand location over a little bit, sit on a flat somewhere, sit next to that bedding, come in on the safe side. We like a lot of times out here, like going up the side of a ridge, just cresting, sitting, waiting for them to come to us. And of course, when you get into second rut, we're starting to flirt with those morning stands again. But really, we're focusing purely on those afternoon, especially when it gets in late season, you don't have any rutting activity, because those unpressured food sources are few and far between. And when you couple it with unpressured cover, you can have a pile of deer there, including the biggest buck in the area, from miles around, because those old mature bucks will move a long ways to find good food, good cover, unlike those does and fawns that have about a fraction of the movement. And here's the cool thing. Now, if you're in a blind, like we love our late season muzzleloader hunting and we're sitting off at a distance, we can allow that pattern to repeat even though we're watching it every single afternoon. As long as the winds are good, we can watch that and allow it to repeat. With a bow, you have to be a little bit more cautious. You might want to get close to that food source, but not close enough when you get in and out of that stand, you're spooking deer on the food source. It's all about preserving that food source. And when you allow that pattern to repeat, that's why we preach when you have food plots, you want enough, you want diversity, you want that late season food source. But heck, if you're hunting a clear cut on public land, it's always going to be there. So if you allow that movement to take place every single day and other people are not, then that ages like a fine wine. Every day it goes by that those deer can hit that food source and the food source remains. That's why you don't want that food running out. You want it to be diverse. You want it to be a clear cut on public land. It's going to be there all winter. When you allow that pattern to continue over and over again, it gets super strong and it's easy to tap into. And as long as you're being careful, you're playing the wind and you're not forcing it, worst thing you could do is spook those deer off that food source. Then you're going to have great afternoon sets. One of my favorite times to hunt. And I hope you can take advantage of that this year. It's a whole lot of fun. And I have to mention, I'll mention this on a few videos, but the first light sale, the big sale of the year, the Black Friday sale is on right now. It's up to 40% off. There's too many items to list. I think it's between 20 and 40% off, and including some of our favorite cold weather gear. So don't miss out on that. The link is in the description. Go check it out. And I hope you can take advantage of a lot of late season hunts. I know a lot of people are done hunting, but boy, what an awesome time of the year to go settle into an afternoon stand about 3 hours before dark and see what happens.